Psalm 105. We're ready for verse 5. Uh, verse 5, what we have as verse 5, 6, and 7, those three verses really contain one thought. So let's see if we can, may take us more than one attempt to get through them, but let's try and look at them as a whole. Remember the wonders he has done. And obviously here, he is God. Remember the wonders he has done, his miracles and the judgments he pronounced, you his servants, the descendants of Abraham, his chosen ones, the children of Jacob. He is the Lord our God. His judgments are in all the earth. Let's start with the idea of remember. I've talked about this a bunch, but it warrants lots of thought and examination. The idea to remember seems like a silly thing to say, but one of God's great gifts to us is that we can remember. And one of the curses of life is that we can't remember. I have read it, and then I've heard women, moms, say they remember the birth of their child, but they don't really remember all the pain involved. Well, that's a good thing. Otherwise, every family would have one child. This is a gift from God, right? Okay. But you know what it's like, and so do I, to be kind of ambushed by memories of sorrow, memories of loss, memories of when you were cheated or betrayed or denied, and I don't think everybody's this way, but a lot of us will experience more of the negative than the positive. Our default goes to negative memories rather than positive memories. I don't quite know the explanation for this other than that we're fallen, broken people. Part of our brokenness and one of the consequences of our fallenness is that many of us, I don't know about most, I've never seen a study on this, I'm sure there are studies, but many of us default to negative, sad memories instead of positive and happy or joyful memories. All right. Lots of words there. Remember, the psalmist says, remember the wonders he has done. Now, when this was written, the reference here to the wonders he has done is probably not so much the personal as it is the corporate, especially in the context of the rest of what is written in what we have as these three verses. Remember the wonders that God has done. Okay, let's go back. We have a source book for those wonders, right? It's the Bible. Now, and for the people of this psalmist's day, the Bible consisted of what we would call the Pentateuch: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The five first books of what we have as the Old Testament. And one of the functions of those 5 books is to tell of God's interaction with people, and specifically with his people, his chosen people. Remember the wonders he has done. If you don't know the wonders he has done, you can't remember them. So an admonition, I think, we can derive from this is study those first 5 books. That would have been the admonition for the original audience of God's work, his dealings with, his encounters with, and his desires for humanity are in those first 5 books. Remember them. I believe that Christians do themselves a disservice if they don't, if they are not students of those books of the Old Testament. One of my favorite studies I've ever done is a study through the book of Genesis. And my focus at that point, this was many years ago now, but was looking at families. And Genesis, you can read Genesis as the story of God and families. Well, okay, but the point is, if you haven't spent time in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, you should. Now, just a little heads up here. Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy are at points, in my experience, quite tedious. But they're not worthless. They're valid and valuable. I know that there are some New Testament, they call themselves New Testament Christians. Okay, got it. That why would you spend time in the Old Testament? All of that was done away with. I'm not sure I believe that. I think Jesus himself said, I didn't come to abolish the law, I came to fulfill it. So that's not been abolished, it has been fulfilled in him. But if you don't, and then for us, the whole of the story of God and his connection, his relationship to humanity is from the beginning of Genesis to the end of Revelation. If we don't know that story, how are you going to remember the wonders that he has done? So, first challenge here is get into the Bible. And I think a lot of Christians, a lot of people kind of do the cherry pick Bible study. And I'm not sure I can say, well, that's just the wrong way. But what I can say is there's another way that I think is even more productive, and that is to read it as a story. And if you want to cherry pick, okay, but get the story. Okay. Remember the wonders he has done. Now that's on the broadest level for all of God's people. For you and I personally, does us great good to remember the wonders that he has done in our lives. Every year on January 10, I celebrate what I call my Lazarus birthday. It is the mark of a day when God did a wonder in my life. had a LAD heart attack, which is the slang for that is the widowmaker. I did some research on it. 7% of people who have that kind of heart attack survive. If it hadn't been for God's miraculous intervention in my life, I wouldn't have survived. It's a big one. And I remember it took me 6 months to get back to work, but it took about, I don't know, 90 days before I even could walk from the car into the auditorium at Canyon Ridge for church. When I did that, people would, well-meaning people, kind and loving people, I'm grateful for them, but they would, lots of them would say, wow, God must have pretty important plans for you. Well, okay. That was 13 years ago. So far, I haven't found a cure for cancer. I haven't brought world peace. I haven't changed the trajectory of the church. My life, in fact, has been dull. I'm grateful that I have had that restart to my life. It helped me rearrange my priorities, and I'm grateful for that. That's part of the wonder that God did. But I don't know why He spared me. And all I know to do about being spared is to trust Him and do what's next. That's what I've been doing for the last 13 years. But that's a biggie. But that's not the only wonder. It's a challenging exercise, but it's very worth it. To draw a timeline of your life. Not very many of us have done that. Draw the timeline, and you probably, instead of the sheet being this way, it needs to be this way, right? Landscape rather than portrait. Because the line is going to be pretty long, and then you need to fill in, okay, what were the specific wonders that you can recall, things God did when He intervened, when He stepped in. It could be an answered prayer. Like me, it could be a pretty dramatic, miraculous intervention. But it could also be, for me, it involves being baptized as a grade school boy in a little narrow-minded Pharisaical church in southwest Kansas after hearing a singing midget preach about Revelation. It involves the birth of all three of our daughters, and before that, falling in love and marrying the most perfect woman for me I can imagine. And on and on and on it goes. That's one way to remember the wonders that God has done in your life. Most of us take that for granted. That was great, thanks God, and we buzz right on through. We're in too big of a hurry. And when I remember the wonders that He has done, I believe it will always spark gratitude. Getting close to the first of the year here. It'd be a good thing to reflect on 2023 and remember the wonders that God has done in our lives. I'll see you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.